Our seminar this weekend is specifically designed to give encouragement and an added impetus to all of those who desire to bring the word of the ascended masters to their fellow heart flames on the planet, those who are their kindred spirits, kindred brothers and sisters of the sacred fire, those who indeed are these 10,000 initially, and then many, many hundreds of thousands and millions in addition to those first 10,000. But you should understand, those of you who undertake this great holy calling, that these life streams are known to the ascended masters by name. Their heart flames are known to them. Their divine plan and destiny has been inscribed on a golden scroll, which is even now held in the hand of their own Holy Christ self, the divine plan that they are to outpicture in this embodiment. These 10,000 life streams, of whom you are yourselves members, are predisposed for this work. They are like a tightly compressed coil of the sacred fire that is merely awaiting the triggering mechanism to release all of that pent-up desire and enthusiasm for the path, the desire to enter into the goal of the service to the ascended masters and the winning of their own victory and their ascension. All of that is something which they, in their heart of hearts, know full well. And you are going out like Diogenes with his lantern of truth, holding it on high so that they can receive that light and ingest the substance of the ascended master's love, learn of their own God presence, and find this path for themselves. As we have talked about in our first introductory remarks, many times when you do set yourself the task of bringing this truth forward, no sooner do you do so than a host of forms of limitation and opposition seem to rise up and bar the path. This can range from personal karmic situations to obligations that you feel you may lawfully have undertaken, to family and friends, to jobs, all kinds of things that seem to gobble up all of the precious creative time and energy of your life and leave you scarce enough time at the end of the day to work in a few decrees for yourself, much less to actually engage and to mount a program of dynamic outreach into the world. I've pointed out to you that there is a certain psychic, intuitive sense on the part of the misqualified energy in those life streams worlds that will rise up and seek to smother your efforts before they are even well begun. And so you might feel initially as if you were trying to slog along through the Sargasso Sea. You're slogging along in swampy, muddy land, barely able to put one foot in front of the other. Which brings us to one of our major points today, which has to do with momentum. Let me back up for just a moment and say again that in the notes that will be released as part of this very first module, there are very practical steps that are described as to how you set about the outer activities of bringing these seminars to pass. And those are well enough put together that we don't need to rehearse them line by line and meticulously going over things that you are fully capable of reading, understanding, and implementing on your own initiative. This seminar is intended by the Ascended Masters to give you an added impetus that will enable you to overcome whatever adversities there might be, and actually begin the process of rendering this service. The very same techniques, I might add, that are used for precipitation and the victorious completion of the delivery of these modules, such as Ecce Deus, the very same momentums apply universally to the rest of your life as well. And so I'd like to share a little bit of background with you as to how you find yourself where you are in your own personal life and what it is that you can do about it. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I think that the vast majority of those of you who are here and will hear this tape in the future would probably admit to yourselves that the life that you currently have is not necessarily the ideal life of world service and of the full expression of the divine ideals of the Ascended Master way of life that you would like to have for your own service to life. And you find, as you look about you, a multitude of individual conditions that seem to be barring your path and preventing you from just cutting loose and doing all of the things that your heart of hearts would really like you to do. This is a combination of opposition based solely on the mass consciousness of the world, as well as your own personal karmic return. And so I'd like to talk about that for just a minute, and then the Ascended Master's antidote to all of these things. Probably the most important of these conditions, at least initially, for the new student, is their own returning karma. Returning karma is a sneaky character, most of the time operating in the dark, invisible, but oh, what a nemesis that returning karma seems to be, that is always hovering around at the edge of your aura, nipping at your heels, and popping up in the most inconvenient ways to produce limitations in your life. It might come back as a karma of an illness, a karma of a limitation in relationships, a karma of inadequacies with the questions of supply. Any one of those might be ways in which karma comes back. It might come back as a form of accident. Who knows what it will be? There are some similarities to all of these, however, and that is that they usually carry with them a certain pressure that is felt emotionally and mentally. It is a claustrophobic sense, kind of like the thing that Edgar Allan Poe described when the walls were closing in on the unfortunate victim of one of his short stories, you know, where the ceiling's coming down, the floor is coming up, and all the walls are coming in. Pressure. That is due to the final stages of a whole chain reaction of events that may have begun long, long ago, perhaps even previous lifetimes, when in ignorance or willfulness, you joined in and energetically sent forth an impulse of destructivity that affected other parts of life. Interestingly enough, the stronger the impulse of negativity, the greater wave that it creates and sends out into the world, and the longer it takes for that wave to come back. But woe be unto you when it does come back, because it comes back with a vice-like grip, like the jaws of hell itself, and seems to latch on to you and pursue you like the hound of heaven. No matter what you might try to do, it seems to always be there. I don't need to tell you how those pressures of fear, anxiety, unnamed anxiety, fear of what might happen, fear of what is going on perhaps in the physical body or what the future might bring. These are the tortures almost that were described by Dante in the Inferno, painted by Michelangelo on the roof of the Sistine Chapel. You can all imagine all of that stuff. Well, those are momentums of emotion, of thought, and of action that have been sent forth into the universe. And the simple fact is that it is an impersonal form of energy that is redeemable by a greater force and power of momentum than the one that is included there. Regardless of how monumental your karma might seem to you, what kind of a vice-like grip it might seem to have, it is finite. It is quantifiable, and it is identifiable to the all-seeing eye of the mind of God and the mind of your Christ self, as well as the ascended masters. Not knowing of your mighty I Am presence or of the ways in which you can repay this karma, most of humanity suffer on and endure the full rebound of that karma as a recompense. It does bring, even through that suffering, a balancing sometimes of the energy that was involved. But this is not the divine plan. It is not the way in which God or the ascended masters would intend. You all know of the consuming action of the great love and compassion of your mighty I Am presence that is able to envelop this unhappy substance in this violet-colored light, which you call the violet flame. It is, at its white fire core, the intense love of the Almighty that is able to overpower electron by electron, atom by atom, thought form by thought form. It is able to swallow up all of these momentums one by one and redeem that energy without you paying the price of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. There is no desire on the part of God or the ascended masters to see retribution rained down upon the necks of humanity. It is not for the purpose of punishment that karma returns. It is an impersonal action of the great law that all are subject to, from the greatest cosmic being to the least elemental. And none can really interfere with that except through the dispensations of mercy, through the love of the God presence. So you should have this sense now that there is a superior dynamo, a source of power that you have discovered that is able to swallow up that returning karma. This karma may be identified by you graphically as something that is a direct limitation in your life. But many times, you have lived with certain karmic limitations for so long that you have accepted them as the way life is going to be for you. And you've really not recognized that they were a form of limitation karmically that your presence was able to deal with. Anything that does not allow you to have the freedom the full God freedom of the expression of your God presence, of the service to life that you would like to render, those all come under the heading of karmic limitations. And I would include in that an inadequate ability, for example, to necessarily meet all of the obligations that you have to life, financial, relationship-wise, and otherwise. Let's be honest, if you had limitless amounts of supply and limitless amounts of vitality and youthfulness, you could not only fulfill those obligations, but you would have an abundance left over with which to pursue your divine plan. So you should have that sense that you can draw forth from your God presence more and more light and momentum of light and pressure of light, which will overpower all of these lesser conditions of your life. Karma, returning karma, over the span of an entire embodiment is kind of like the action of a boa constrictor. You know, those are those big 20-foot-long Amazonian snakes that kill their prey by means of suffocation. What they do is they twine themselves about their hapless victim and wait until the poor, unfortunate creature breathes out. And then they constrict just a little bit. And then they hold. And then there's another inspiration and breath on the part of the creature, and it breathes in again. And then just at that very moment, the boa constrictor constricts again. And so each time allowing less and less of an in-breath until the lungs are completely collapsed. So that is what karma does over the course of an entire lifetime. It comes in and in and in with this mountainous pressure, and it causes old age, it causes all of the poverty and misqualification, and it is an inexorable force. It doesn't matter how rich you are, how powerful you are. It doesn't matter what you choose to do as an individual or as a nation or a society. If you contravene these laws of karma, karma will ultimately win out over human stubbornness and defiance in the face of that karma. Do you follow what I'm saying? If you don't have the dimension of the intercession from the level of the Godhead, civilizations fall eventually from this action of returning karma, which can apply to nations and continents and peoples and races as much as it does to individuals. There's no way to keep piling on more and more and more of that without nature shrugging off the discord that has been imposed upon her, the white fire core of light thrusting that off and having it come back upon its source. Now, I grant you that that does paint a rather pathetic, graphic picture. But sometimes it is important to at least look at it squarely, fearlessly, and say to that appearance, you have no power, because there is a greater power in the universe at work. And you, as Ascended Master students, are discovering that in your own electronic body and in the call to your God presence first and foremost, with the assistance, of course, of the Ascended Masters, you have the ability to dissolve away all of that pressure of misqualification that might be applying to your world, and to put in its place a superior and opposite force for God good, and have the impersonal concept or principle of the pressure of light, which is, in the case of misqualified karma working against you, the very same principle when it is applied to the pressure of the light of your God presence becomes a pressure that will force good into your life, just as misqualified karma eventuates in negativity being ruptured into your life experience. So it is all really a question of momentum. And what we as Ascended Master students are doing, you and I, is we have thrown down the gauntlet quite bravely, courageously, in the face of all of the conditions in the world. And we are going to take the Ascended Masters and beloved Saint Germain at his word. Saint Germain says some pretty categorical statements when he brought forth the teachings of the I Am Presence. He didn't really have any mealy-mouthed equivocation about the power of the God Presence to overcome every condition. He didn't leave it up here in some metaphysical domain where it was all pink hearts and flowers in a manana heavenly world idea. But rather, he said categorically that the power of the light, the pressure of the light rays and the flames of God focused by the God Presence can deal with and solve every condition of one's life and one's affairs. And so that is what we as Ascended Master students are doing. We have resolved that we will prove this teaching. We will demonstrate it so that the world will see and learn from example, whereas other solutions, problem-solving approaches have been taken by other people in the world. They will at long last discover that the invocation and the drawing forth of the light from the God Presence is the permanent, lasting solution, solving all of life's problems. That is a golden ladder of light that leads directly into the heart of the sun and into the heart of the ascension. So that is what you should have as an attitude as you go to take this course to other students, that you have a brand spanking new, never before heard of or thought of way of addressing all of the issues of life. One of the points which Saint Germain makes is that it is possible to have human remedial agents for sicknesses, for problems of the economy, and so forth, and to go in a linear fashion, solving your problems as they appear one by one. But he also goes on to point out that when you do it this way, trying to solve one problem, many times, many more problems prop up along the way. Reminds me of that arcade game that they often have at children's arcades, where there's a little mallet there and a bunch of gopher holes, and the gopher sticks his head up out of the hole, and the child is supposed to bop the gopher on his head. And no sooner does he bop one than another one comes up, and the game is to see if you can keep up with the increasing rapidity with which those gophers keep appearing out of their holes. I don't know how often you felt like your life was like that you were problem solving, putting out fires one after another, and it seemed like no matter how good you got at it, life seemed to have the ability to deal out more than you were ever able to deal with. That's because the human is trying to do things at its own level. The alternative to this is that you change the whole rules of the game. You don't play by that set of rules any longer, but you draw upon a superior power that is superior to all of them, and you call down such a Niagara Falls of the outpouring of the light of your God presence, and you send it forth so that it fills every part of life where you are concerned. I like the example in this case of the concept of an avalanche of light going forth. Because, first of all, how does an avalanche begin? It begins with an overburden of pure white snowy substance high on the mountains, and then some little insignificant sound or action, like a clap or something, triggers the overburden to come rushing down off the side of the mountain. To me, that's like when we send up our calls. That's that one little clap, that one little call for help, call for the light to come forth. And then, in return from that, comes forth this great outpouring, an avalanche of cosmic light substance from the heart of the I Am Presence, far out of proportion, energy-wise, to the call. Hundreds, thousands, millions of times greater than the release of the call is the answer to the call. And when that light comes down, nothing stands in its path. It moves trees, boulders, locomotives. It just scours its pathway down the mountainside and moves mountains of adversity out of the way. And so it is with the light that comes forth from your mighty I Am Presence. That light knows no opposition. It knows no thing that is able to oppose it, because it is the consciousness, the God consciousness of your God self. And that God self has never cognized limitation, never cognized finite quantity. And so at that level of your God presence, which spans eternity, it is a mere flick of a little pinky finger for your mighty I Am Presence to send forth this avalanche of light that comes down. The other part of this analogy, which is so very useful in this case, as I've read about unfortunate people who find themselves caught in an avalanche, one of the things that they describe is how solid the snow gets when it finally comes to rest. And if you happen to be caught in there, once again, there's hardly any room. It doesn't leave any voids. It is absolutely solid, and it fills every little crack and crevice and pore of the surrounding matter. And so it is when you call forth the light of your God presence. You're not going to be stingy, nor is your presence with this light. You don't have to be parsimonious. You understand what I'm saying? You don't have to practice some kind of worry about waste in the invocation of the light. There is limitless volume of light that is intended to be released by the heart of your God presence, because it is all charged with the Ascended Master's light that can never be requalified by anything less than itself. It is all going to bring a blessing to life, and so none of it is wasteful as long as it is preserved at the level of harmony. So what happens is every condition in your life is filled with the God consciousness of your presence. If there's a relationship over here, it is the God presence in action there. If there is a condition of some kind of a concern over here, the presence fills it so that there's no room for anything less. If there is a condition within your physical body, there's no room for that appearance or vibration, because the presence is going to fill it. And the presence is going to fill everything, and everything, and everything is going to be full of that light substance, displacing everything else. This is how you bring in the kingdom of the Golden Age. It is not a question of simply abstaining from negativity. It is not a question of identifying evil, of classifying it, of doing swordplay with evil and driving it out. It is a question of putting God good in place of all of the rest of that and holding it there. And in a sense, you see what is happening is it is the exact opposite of that boa constrictor thing I was talking about before, where instead of there being this claustrophobic smallness that grips your life more and more, now it is expansion and hold, sustain forever, expansion and hold, expansion and sustain. Fortunately for us, this light that we call forth continues to flow. You have to have the sense about your mighty I Am presence that it truly is a sun. Our blessed sun of Helios and Vesta got fired up about 4.5 billion years ago, I think, and it's been burning ever since. Never had a day off in 4.5 billion years. Presumably burning with a rather constant radiation, such that would allow life to develop as it has on this planet. It is going on and on and on and on. Presumably there are some stars that have been around almost as long as this particular outbreath of the whole of creation since the Big Bang. I am not sure how far back they go, but many, many billions of years, even longer than that. So get the sense with your mighty I Am presence that it is a sun that shines. And once you throw open a window through your call and the light starts streaming through that call into a situation, it goes forth as long as that call needs to go forth. If it needs to go forth for 100 years or 1,000 years, it will. Only when the call is completely precipitated will that light ray cease to perform its perfect work. And in some cases, that never happens at all because of the way that it is intended to perform its work. So you should have this sense that the light is going forth from that electronic body night and day once you have fulfilled the law of octaves and invoked the light for yourself. So we deal as Ascended Master students with this issue of momentum. And as you start out to do your work in your altar groups and your temples, as well as your own personal application, send the momentum of light ahead of you into those conditions and have that fully dealt with at the level of the light before your physical body or everyone else arrives on the scene. When we began Friday afternoon, which I guess was only yesterday, seems like a lot longer than just simply yesterday already, we made some calls, which I just wanted to point out to you would be very important as you are preparing for your work. We gave the calls on page 32 for the cutting free of the students, the calls for the cosmic light. You'll notice there, in those calls to the cosmic light, the third invocation, I am the thunderous descent of a mighty avalanche of cosmic light substance from the heart of the great Ascended Master Octave, the mighty rising flood tide of cosmic light. All of those are invocative of that action of the sacred fire that I was just describing to you. One of the other activities that you will want to be sure to invoke is the call to Lord Gautama, the call to the Mother Light, on the bottom of page 28. Beloved Omega, beloved Lord Gautama, blaze a liquid light fountain of thy glorious mother flame on the altar, in the heart center and the altar of the altar groups and the temples. Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. In this regard, he was talking about the pure light of the mother raised up as the Christ light along the spinal altar. He also made another statement having to do with this pure white fire light. He said, wherever the carcass is, there shall the eagles be gathered together. The eagles being those high-flying, free-spirited life streams who are drawn to the sacred fire. They're drawn to ascended master light. This is an impersonal action of the sacred fire that you will want to raise up. If you begin as one individual in a city, so be it. Create an altar in your own home. If you have 2 or 3 individuals of like heart and mind with you, you come together and you have your consecrated force field, and there you anchor this light of the mother flame and the light of the threefold flame sponsored by our own beloved Lord Gautama. When Carolyn and I were in the early months of the dispensation of the Temple of the Presence, we knew that certain flames were to be anchored upon the altar of the heart center, and that there would be distribution points of that anchorage, other replicas of that flame that would be established as a network all across the world, across the face of the earth. And we sent the call up to heaven, not any master in particular, and asked the question, who amongst the ascended masters is willing to ensoul these flames upon the altar? And instantly came back the response of Lord Gautama, who basically announced to us that it was his office to ensoul that flame, and that he joyfully looked forward to doing so. And so the threefold flame, as a replica of the threefold flame which he nourishes, not only on everyone's heart flame, but there in the retreat of the Brotherhood at Shambhala, that threefold flame action is focused by Lord Gautama in answer to your call as a magnet of the love of the great central sun in your home area. And when you make that call for that magnet, it is like you run the banner of Shambhala up the flagpole. And on the emotional plane and on the mental plane, the light goes out like a searchlight from a lighthouse. It is a beam that announces its presence to all of the light bearers and potential torch bearers within the reach of that beam of light. And it is a magnet of the love of the Godhead and the great central sun that will act inexorably to magnetize those of like heart to your activity. If I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. Those who are hungering for the presence in their life, those who want the living God, are those who will find their way into your activities and stay, because they are fed by the substance of the living presence. That's what they want. Those who come for curious reasons, those who are the samplers, who like to be Epicureans of every little thing that comes along in the new age, they will come and go. But those who have a hunger for the living presence will remain polarized to that love flame which you invoke. So this again is building momentum, raising up that momentum and establishing that force field. And as you work at the building of that momentum, you know as sure as the sun comes up every morning that it must produce results, because it is the impersonal law of the universe that that superior momentum will work its divine design through the consciousness of those who are intended to be drawn into the light. So that is one of the most important things that you can do. That flame of love going forth will hold the balance for the misqualified substance in the life of those individuals. When you are getting ready to give your lectures, it is important to give calls to deal with that substance both in your own world and in the world of those who will be in attendance. To give that in the days and hours prior to taking the platform. It's good if you have other assistants who are helping with the practical side of making all the arrangements and doing all the work. That all has to be done, but that same group needs to come together and give the calls for the cutting loose and setting free of the individuals who are to be a part of that. And if you understand, as I've said to you before, that these individuals, their names are known, their flames are known, and you are building this momentum which will draw them to that sacred fire which they, at inner levels, know and adore just as much as you do, then you will bring forth that victory. It is up to you to fire your life with this greater sense of momentum. If there is a sluggishness, a lethargy, a sense of ennui that has built up in your own life experience, you're the one who's going to have to kindle the flames of enthusiasm and bowl over that momentum within yourself with this greater momentum of the light. I assure you that that is how the Ascended Masters have done it on their own path as well. You may recall there was a time when Jesus was an embodiment serving as one of the prophets of the Old Testament, the prophet Elisha. And on certain occasions, it was necessary for him to perform a healing, and he called for a musician to come and to assist him in his meditation and to carry him those last few steps back into the full attunement which he would desire with his God presence. This is available to all of you as well. When we began our service today, you heard the stirring tones of those marches as part of the summoning. Master Moria has had a number of embodiments in which he had served as a general or a king or a ruler of one sort or another, and that martial music is something which the angels of Archangel Michael and Archangel Zadkiel's legions are very accustomed to responding. And it will have this capacity of rolling back this planetary mass consciousness, which is kind of like an inert mass of lethargic, slowly moving substance that each of us must cut through on our way to our victory. I myself am very partial to marches. I love the way in which there is this thrust of momentum that thrusts out and accomplishes that expansion of the light of the God presence out. And so I've prepared a couple of meditations for you, one which is intended to give you a glimpse into the action of the light as it goes forth from your mighty I Am presence, the concerted assistance of the Ascended Masters, and also the participation of the many legions of angels who actually do the spade work of dealing with substance. Everything, as Saint Germain explains, is intelligently directed. And so there does come a point when there is an angel with a flaming sword that is holding that sword into a very specific condition and dealing with it point blank. And so you have to bring your own feelings, your own imagination, your own four lower bodies to be the chalice for all of that to come down through your world and out into your own expression. As Ascended Masters have explained it, they don't need the victory for themselves. They have already won their victory. It is up to you and I to follow their example and to bring it forth in our own lives. So, Henry, if you please, may we have the march. You can almost see the phalanxes of blue and violet angels marching in, 10 abreast of each other, bearing their banners and their swords, and then marching out again, fanning out north, south, east, and west, fulfilling the work that has to be done. Each of you has 10,000 angels of Archangel Michael available for you to assign every single day. Whatever the conditions are in your life, they're puny in comparison to this right hand of God that works through these angels and archangels and fans out into every condition of your life. And of course, out of all of it, there can only come the victory of the light. As you're giving your decrees to the violet flame and the blue lightning, you should have this sense of the overwhelming momentum of your mighty I Am presence that is vastly superior to any karmic momentum that might still reside in the appearance world of your own situation. Take note that This is the most efficacious when you're not seeking to impose your will on any other part of life, but you are strictly focusing on, first of all, changing the conditions that have to do with your own personal situation, your own free will. Of course, you are willing to give mercy to life, but you're not even wishing to impose mercy or righteousness against the free will of any other part of life. You will give whatever calls for the mercy of the law, but you will not abrogate it. In order to have this kind of power, it is as important to know what not to do as it is to know what to do. One of the things that we have observed consistently with certain Ascended Master students who have come out of certain other activities is that they have noticed an almost immediate step up in the power of their application. And they've wondered why they have felt so much more light in response to their calls. The reason is something that they might not have ever suspected, and that is that some of the practices that they had been guided into were actually not in keeping with the laws of free will and of constructive use of God's light. And so the wisdom of their own Holy Christ self resolved that there should be a finite metering of the light in response to their calls, because the mercy of the law would not allow drawing forth more and more and more light and charging it into matrices of destructivity. And once they have weaned themselves of the need to engage in those practices, then their Christ self just as clearly saw that it was now possible to step up the flow of that light to go out into their world. So much of the instruction that's part of this Ecce Deus includes things of what not to do, as well as the things that should be done. I'd like to leave you with one final concept, going back to the original theme of this message of God individualized, Ecce Deus. Again, if you look at how the race of humanity has gotten by through life, we rely on other parts of the food chain, if you will, to provide for us. We rely on plants to provide sustenance. Some still rely upon animals to provide sustenance as well. And in many ways, we rely on other people to provide for our well-being. In times past, you had conditions of slavery and of tyranny where the few imposed their will upon the many. The few might live in great luxury, as in the case of the Roman Empire, but they lived that luxury on the backs of the suffering of millions of other life streams who were not so fortunate as they. You have a gift to give to the world, and that is a new way of resolving all of the challenges of life, a new source from which to draw everything that you might need. It's no longer a case that you are dependent upon other people or other parts of life for your sustenance, because your God presence is wholly and completely self-sufficient, self-reliant, self-created, and self-sacrificing. And so from within yourself, you are able to draw forth everything you need for everything in your life, of whatever it might be, whether it's transportation, clothing, food, relationships. In the fullness of the presence is everything that you could require or lawfully desire, everything from within yourself. so that you are no longer needing to depend upon others. We have some in our congregation today who have an occupation that illustrates this point for me quite well. And I hope they won't mind me using that example. It's one I've used before. It's the case of selling real estate. I've always said to myself, I would never want to do that job. And the reason is, you're at the mercy of so many other factors that appear to be kind of out of your control. You have to find a willing buyer. You have to find a willing seller. And you have to find probably a willing lender as well. And no matter how good you do your job, in a sense, any one of those three or many other factors can go wrong, and all of a sudden, all of this carefully crafted work seems to fall apart. And it doesn't seem as if anything that you've done has brought that result. And so I guess in a way it becomes a numbers game where you have to play the laws of probability that if you get enough things going, some are going to eventually come through. But it's terrible to feel that you are at the mercy of what someone else will do for your own prosperity. And the gift that you have to give to everyone who will ever find this teaching is that you no longer have to look outside of your own mighty I Am presence for your prosperity, for your health, for your well-being, or for anything, because that presence is an infinite source, so much so that not only will you be able to fulfill your own personal needs, but you will become a wellspring. You will become a river of blessing and benediction that will bless every other part of life. You will draw forth from within yourself the life and sustenance which will enable other parts of life to be blessed as well. This is the great freedom of the teachings of the Ascended Masters, that right from within your own presence, everything is to be drawn forth. You have discovered a new source of power. It's not coal, it's not wind power, hydroelectric power, nuclear power, and it's better than cold fusion because it actually works. It is the light of the source of all of life that you can trigger with limitless capabilities and produce everything that life has to offer. It may well turn out for a time that your God presence chooses to use the conveniences of other life streams and other circumstances outwardly to produce some of those good things that are needed in your life. That is all according to the divine plan. It's all based on this pressure of light that I described to you before, where a person, places, conditions, and things are going to swing into alignment to produce the answer to your call through natural means, not necessarily through phenomenal or magical or miraculous means initially. But the point is that you are flexing your spiritual muscles and gaining self-mastery using techniques that in time will produce the same powers that Jesus demonstrated, that Saint Germain as the Wonder Man of Europe demonstrated, and as you as an ascended master will go on to draw forth from within yourself for all of eternity. You are learning to live life synthesizing the light of your God presence. And the beauty of problem solving this way is that it is as I said last night, a clean burning fuel. It does not in any case incur karmic recompense, karmic lashback, where you are going to have to suffer the results of some kind of compromise of cosmic law. It is absolutely magnificent to finally discover that this is how life can be lived. And as you feel this companionship and cooperation between you and your mighty I Am Presence and the other ascended masters, you will feel that there is a direction and a purpose and an ongoingness to your life, that you're not standing still, but you are moving forward with your destiny, that there is progress, forward progress toward that goal of the ascension and the destiny that even lies beyond the ascension. The song that I played to you earlier is very good as a meditation when you are dealing with your decrees, when you're dealing with world conditions or personal karmic conditions and so forth. But you should have the understanding that there needs to go forth from your being 24 hours a day this glow of health and well-being that is the natural estate of your God presence. It might be the silent waters that run deep. It might not be something that comes with great fanfare and trumpet calls, but nonetheless, there is a constant radiation of that sense of well-being that continues to fill space, hallow space, consecrate space, where you are 24 hours a day. As you engage with the flow of the light from the great central sun that pours forth from your mighty I Am Presence, and you begin to feel that direction in your being, and you know where you're headed, and you have that sense of the North Star of your own identity, it will be something that goes on and on and on and can be maintained as it needs to be maintained in perpetuity. You see, you're starting a momentum that is going to be relentless. It's not just something that is going to be a spurt. You're going to have a little spurt of enthusiasm, and then you're going to fall back into lethargy and stop that momentum so that the karma comes rolling back in again. No, you have kindled a fire that is never going to go out. It's going to go on and on and on. A week ago, Sunday, we were down in southern Vermont, and we had the meditation of the sitar, played by beloved Rup Verma, and I was meditating as he was playing to some of the carrier waves of some of the certain tones that don't change in pitch and are kind of an underlying tone that just goes on and on and on and on and on, like the Om of the universe that goes on and on and on and thrusts out and thrusts out. That is the case with your own application of the light. It just must be so relentless and persistent and ongoing in between the intervals of your application that there's no chance for any lesser momentum to rear its ugly head and appear as an obstacle in your path. In that regard, I think it is quite fitting that I close with this meditation that hearkens to the flame of beloved Saint Germain. It comes from one of the keynotes of a story that was taken from the imagination of those who were trying to imagine the author of the Shakespearean plays in love at an early age in his life. And it truly captures the kind of radiation that your own mighty I Am Presence and Holy Christ Self will continue to pour forth in between the times that you're decreeing. You see that light around your Holy Christ Self, that golden pink glow ray, and the hands of your Holy Christ Self upraised like this, sending forth that light. That should be going on around your world all the time. It's kind of like the keynote of your own life stream that is a constant tinkling melody that, like silver bells, are constantly ringing in the background. Beloved Mother Mary explained that during the many times that Jesus appeared to the disciples after his resurrection. When he would come, the strains of Joy to the World seemed to fill the air on each occasion. So for each of you, there will be this musical fanfare. Wagner is the first to really identify a certain musical theme that each of the main characters in his operas would announce when they would come on stage. So there is this fanfare of your own God presence. And I'm sure that beloved Saint Germain has many, this being one that captures this indomitable optimism, this sense of going somewhere. We call it in our family the traveling music. We put it on in the car when we're going to a destination that we're looking forward to. So this is traveling music to your ascensions, ladies and gentlemen.